This is the Law for Community Workers podcast series, Till the Violence Ends. All information provided in this episode is correct at the time of recording and should be regarded as information only and not legal advice. Please see the timestamps in our show notes for a breakdown of the episode, along with links to any resources mentioned throughout. Legal Aid New South Wales would like to acknowledge that all our podcasts are recorded on Aboriginal lands across New South Wales. We pay our respects to all traditional owners and custodians of those lands and extend that respect to elders past and present, and especially to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening. Every episode, our guests will continue to shine a community light on this most important topic. These episodes may contain details of violence, so listener discretion is strongly advised. Our guest this episode is Tanya Whitehouse, the coordinator of Macarthur Women's Domestic Violence Court Advocacy Service. Hi Tanya, thank you for joining us today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Hi Pauline, thanks so much for having me.
So Tanya, would you please tell us a little bit about your role in the work of the WDVCAS service?
So I'm the manager of Macarthur Women's Domestic Violence Court Advocacy Service. We're one of 27, I'm just going to abbreviate it, WDVCASs because it's such a long name. I will state at the beginning that domestic violence is mainly perpetrated by men, but there are definitely male victims of domestic and family violence as well. When I talk today, I'm going to talk about victims as women or people who identify as female because that's our core business and that's what we know as a specialist service. We're one of 27 across the state. So basically the role of the Women's Domestic Violence Court Advocacy Service is to support those women who have issues, concerns, are going to court specific to the issue of domestic and family violence. So I manage a service based in Macarthur, which is southwest Sydney. We cover Campbelltown, Camden and Wallandilly LGAs. And we support any women in those postcode areas that have any issues around domestic violence. The Safer Pathway model for the WDVCAS is one that involves a significant collaboration with a range of stakeholders. So what happens with police is when they attend a domestic violence incident, they will then put her into a system that goes to a dashboard, and basically that WDVCAS gets every referral from that police area command that covers the postcode that WDVCAS has. So that's automatically sent to them. An example is that only a couple of weeks ago we had 133 referrals for that week just from Campbelltown and Camden Police Area Commands. So there's a lot of busy WDVCASs everywhere. Part of the requirement for that Safer Pathway model is that every WDVCAS has 24 hours to make a first attempt at contact, and then we have 5 days to have 3 attempts at contact to talk to her. Quite often there's no court matter associated with that. If there is an apprehended domestic violence order and or a DV related charge, we will get a narrative about what the police have done for that. However, the majority of our calls could well be with no information other than names and addresses, and then we make those cold calls and ask her if she's safe and continue that conversation if she feels that she wants to do that.
Okay. You spoke about getting referrals from the police. So what about external referrals? Can other services refer to your service, and how does that work? What's the best way for that to happen for
Absolutely.
our workers?
One thing that I would potentially say to anyone who's listening and they live wherever they live in New South Wales, you can actually ring a 1-800 number to be immediately connected to the WDVCAS that covers your area. So you ring 1-800 D, for Victor, CAS for Sam. You put in, it's prompted then to put in a postcode and it connects you directly with that service provider. That's only during the week, but there is support on the weekends with other options. What I would say is that if you're a service provider or even you're a family member or a friend and you want to get some advice or some support around what your next steps could be to support that person, or you are the victim survivor wanting to reach out for help, ring that number and you'll get put through immediately. The role of a WDVCAS is it's a domestic violence specialist service, and they're able to do anything and everything that comes with domestic and family violence. So we don't just go to court. We can do referrals. We can help you with a safe phone. We can help you with gift vouchers if we need to. We can do safety plans. We can help you to get into accommodation.
While our series targets caseworkers, community workers and support workers, for the benefit of listeners who may not have those formal trainings, Tanya, would you please explain for our audience what domestic violence is and what behaviours are included in the definition?
Okay, so domestic violence covers a really broad range of behaviours. It can be with an intimate partner, an ex-partner, family member, or it could be someone who lives in a group home situation. Domestic violence includes behaviours like mental abuse, physical abuse, financial abuse, sexual abuse, cultural abuse, psychological abuse, stalking or intimidating behaviour, social isolation, geographical isolation, faith abuse, and what we tend to find is that these behaviours operate in more than one context. So a lot of our clients will talk about more than one thing happening to them.
So Tanya, what about the new law of coercive control and the fact that it's acknowledged as a part of domestic and family violence? Can you talk to us a little bit about coercive control?
Sure, Pauline. So what I will say is that coercive control has been something that's been around since the dawn of time. What is really positive is it's now recognised as a criminal offence. There's a lot of work to do around that for workers in the sector in terms of being able to identify that with clients and also best support them to get their evidence and their conversations ready for the police. So coercive control is the core behaviour of domestic violence. It's repeated behaviour and it has intent with patterns. So it could be acts of assault, acts of threats to harm, threats to punish. They're all behaviours that have a consistency with them. So what the government has done is legislated that as an offence, and what we need to be really careful of too is that when we talk about coercive control as an offence with a client is that we make sure that the information we're gathering with her to help her is only from the 1st of July 2024. You can't go back to report something that happened prior to that date, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. That's good to know.
What I would say too to anybody who's wanting to get a lot more information around the legal side of coercive control is to look at the Legal Aid podcasts on coercive control because they're really helpful. They do take a little while, but they're really good to watch and you can keep watching them over and over and take some notes. So just a little plug for that because it's actually really good.
Well, thank you for that. And also just to let people know that this series has an episode that is focusing on coercive control with two of our experienced criminal solicitors, and that's coming up soon. What are some of the other supports that a CAS can provide?
They attend court on the Apprehended Domestic Violence Order List Day, which is different days of the week in different courts. We're there as a support service, so we sometimes pick up women that we haven't yet spoken to. We also support women who are female defendants at court who identify that they've been a victim survivor of abuse with that other party. So we're able to offer in Macarthur, we have duty solicitor scheme. That is funded by Legal Aid. There's a number of WDVCAS across the state that have that, and those duty solicitors give the free legal advice and then represent her in court for her matter.
How does WDVCAS interact with other services, as in the police, courts, health, housing?
We have to work with everybody. You can't manage the issue of domestic violence as a sole service provider. It just doesn't work, never will. So the key thing here is that we have to work collaboratively with everybody. We have to find ways of having best practice for supporting those victim survivors and their families, and we need to work together with a goal of that victim survivor being safe, whatever that looks like. We might need to advocate with police, we might need to advocate with housing or Centrelink, we might need to advocate with other service providers to say, you know, this is what we're doing, what are you doing, let's work together for that client and have a client-centred, trauma-focused approach. The Safer Pathway model is very broad in its context, but there are a number of things that come with it. So I've worked with Macarthur WDVCAS for over 32 years, and I have to say that I think the Safer Pathway model is probably one of the best that I've ever seen anywhere. It involves a whole stack of things that I won't go into detail, but one of the primary things is a thing called a SAM meeting. So a SAM meeting is a safety action meeting. They're held every fortnight across the entire state by every WDVCAS and their police area commands. Those meetings are for any women who are assessed under another abbreviation called a DVSAT, which is the Domestic Violence Safety Assessment Tool. Police will ask questions to her. She may choose to answer some. She may choose not to answer all of them for a whole lot of different reasons. When we ring her and have a conversation with her, we do the DVSAT again. And quite often she'll tell us a lot more because she feels she's not worried about him getting charged for something she doesn't want to say. There's a whole lot of barriers around that. If she answers yes to 12 or more of the 25 questions, she's escalated to something called serious threat. Serious threat means she is a participant on the agenda for the SAM meeting, and the SAM meeting, when it's held, has a whole bunch of stakeholders that sit at the table. They all have to be a manager so they can make a decision on the spot, and some of the stakeholders, I'll just in my head go around the table. So we've got police, WDVCAS, child protection, housing, education, health, other support services in our area. Example is Staying Home Leaving Violence. We have the men's support service, so male victim survivors also come to those meetings and have their own advocate. We have corrections, and we have local services that come, a local Aboriginal service, and we also have a few other little services that pop in as well. If you are a support service and you do a DVSAT with your client, which I will say I would question why you don't as part of your assessment tool, because we need to have a common language, and the DVSAT is that.
So is the DVSAT something that other services are free to use?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And with that comes a huge bonus of being able to have her go to the SAM meeting. The worker comes as her advocate, and she can sit there and hear what everybody around the table has to say, because the meeting is confidential. So nothing's minuted around what's discussed. The only things that are minuted are the actions. So if she's looking to get an urgent transfer, then housing would be a part of that. The advocate talks to the issues. Housing say, well, we will action this, this and this. And then in 2 weeks' time when we come back, the question is asked of all of the matters that have been held previously. They will say, what happened with this matter? Has this been done? The best part I love about the SAM is accountability.
Yeah.
Everybody's accountable for what they say they'll do.
So there's actually a follow-up to that. Oh, that's wonderful.
And what I would say with the service providers is look at the DVSAT. It's not the be-all and end-all, but it's certainly a really key part to assessing risk for domestic violence. So make it a part of your assessment tool. If you're not, why aren't you? And let's do this so that we can make sure that we have the best outcomes we can possibly get.
Yeah.
For Macarthur, in terms of the SAM meetings, we've got the largest SAMs that in the state. Our meeting goes for about 4 or 5 hours. We have up to 50 people on the agenda, and those matters are consistently done every 2 weeks. So we understand the risk, we understand the role of everyone, and the stakeholders within our SAM are all there on the same page. Nobody's there to make it a negative experience for that victim survivor. Our job is to make sure that she and her children, if she has children, are safe. Yeah.
How many courts are in that area, the Southwest Sydney area?
For our WDVCAS, we only have Campbelltown and Picton courts.
Okay.
Some other WDVCASs might have a lot more, particularly our rural and regional sister services. They would have a lot more courts and a significant distance to travel.
So all of the escalated matters from any of those courts can end up at a SAM meeting?
Yes, they can.
Yeah. Okay, that's wonderful.
And the SAMs are held at different places. Ours is held at a police station. They hold them in different areas around. So they're determined by the police area command. Yeah. So, some WDVCASs might have 2 SAMs, but we only have 1.
Okay. So we're going to have the link to the DVSAT on our show notes for people if they want to download that for their file work. So, Tanya, is there a time limit on a woman accessing your service?
No.
Okay,
absolutely
so and they can
not.
access multiple times as well?
Absolutely, they can. We've got some clients that we've had an off for many, many years. So the way that we look at it is if a woman feels confident enough to come and engage with us, it doesn't matter how many times she needs to do that. We want to be that service that she feels safe to go to. Yeah. She may or may not do the suggestions and the information provided. She might make a different choice, and that's fine, but she knows that she's always got the same space to come back to if she needs to.
Excellent. That's really good to know. What are some of the things that you can talk to us about that workers and their clients can do together to try and make leaving as safe as possible? It is well known amongst workers that it is the most dangerous time for a woman.
Absolutely.
Or one of the most dangerous times for a woman is when she attempts to leave.
Yep.
So what is it that workers can do together with clients to try and make that a safe thing to do, or the safest possible thing to do?
The key thing that I've been probably banging on for many, many years is just work collaboratively. Don't work in a silo. Put aside your egos if you work for services where it's like, oh, we're going to do this and whatever, whatever. If you're not going to work collaboratively, you're not doing the best that you can for that client. And what I would say is if you've got everybody has a WDVCAS. If you're working with a woman that's been, for example, referred to you as an IFP provider, so you're working with the family as a whole, you can always contact your local WDVCAS and find out if she's working with that service as well. And that way you inform the client and you say, hey, you've got Tanya from Macarthur WDVCAS working with you with the AVO stuff. We're going to work with you with the kids to keep you safe. Let's just make sure that you're clear on who's doing what so that women aren't having to repeat their story, which is not something that we ever want them to have to do, and we're all on the same page. It's the same when we do a referral to another service provider. If we want to refer her to another service, we will give as much information as we can with her consent, because then she doesn't have to retell that, and that is something that we all know gets minimised a little bit more every time she has to tell it.
Yeah. So is there a flip side to that as well? Like, what's the best way to support a client who stays in the home or relationship?
I think that, it varies in different areas. It really depends what service providers you've got in your area that can help. Remembering that there are a number of options. So victim services for an immediate needs support payment, you can apply for money to help her get cameras or a duress alarm, things like that. You can also look locally if you've got a staying home leaving violence service. We use ours all the time. And the beauty of them is that they do a home safety audit. So they come and check out the house. They know what they're looking for. She may say, I think he's got cameras here, or I think he's done something with my phone. They can look into all of that sort of stuff as well. And having that real model of her being as safe as she can so she doesn't have to move, because why should she? If it's safe enough for her to stay, why should she have to move? But use the services that you've got. Another option is also the escaping violence payment that's available. That can also get things like vouchers or cameras. There are lots of options if you're not a service provider that has a financial brokerage option in your own funding.
Is there anything coming up in the DivCAS space that caseworkers should keep an eye out for?
Look, I think there's always things that are evolving. What I would say is that your local WDVCAS will always provide that consistent service support around being a DV specialist service. I do know that there is potential to look at reassessing the DV SAT and the questions with that, and that's a work in progress. I would say to keep in mind too that coercive control is such a new thing that I really think workers really need to do as much as they can to be informed around that and what kind of responsibilities they could hold to support her with that. Women who might not feel confident to go to the police, women who've had a bad experience with police before, women who have different cultural backgrounds that don't understand the law, women who just don't want to go to the police unless they've got someone with them. I think a really critical part that we all need to look at is how are we supporting her and how are we ensuring that she's well informed and empowered to make an informed decision rather than just saying you can do this or you can do that.
So, Tanya, can I ask you just a little bit about specialist roles within the CASs? Could you tell me a little bit about those?
Sure. Every women's domestic violence court advocacy service across the state is funded for a Aboriginal focus worker. They're called DFE Specialist Workers Aboriginal Focus. Every WDVCAS should have one of those workers. A lot of other WDVCASs will also have a multicultural focus worker. What I have in terms of our key workers is we have a number of DFE specialist workers, but then we also have a number of case workers that have a specific area of expertise. So I have an Aboriginal caseworker, a youth focused, a disability focused, a couple of generalists and an LGBTIQ plus focused caseworker. So while their core role is working with those particular community groups, they will work with anyone that they need to. And I think that having the positions that I've developed have been specific to the needs of our area. So you may find that other services may not have specific roles that we do, but they would be more focused towards what's the needs in their area. Keeping in mind too that our sister CASs that are in rural and regional have very limited options in terms of support. So the caseworker may well be the only person that can work with her because they have very little options, or they've got waiting lists at other services. So
okay, yeah, fair enough. So we've come to the end. The last question I have is if there's anything that you could change about the law in New South Wales and services for victim survivors of domestic and family violence, what would it be?
How long have you got? Yeah. When I look at what's on social media and what's in a whole lot of things, is we always hear about the bad and the negative. I think what we also need to do is recognise, highlight and support the positives that we see with our local service providers, recognise the hard work that all of the workers in this sector are doing, recognise the work that they're doing with sometimes very limited budgets, and work together. So in terms of the law, I think that we've got a lot on our plate at the moment to kind of digest coercive control and how that looks and what we're going to do to support those victim survivors with reporting that, how we also support the police with that evidence base around that offence. I think what we could do is we could sit down and say, well, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. There's bad in every sector and every service provider, whether it's police, a government department, DV workers in general. People are always going to find negative experiences. What I would suggest is part of the role that we all have as advocates is to be that voice alongside her to raise the issues and concerns, but keeping it as a proactive way of doing it. Let's work better together. I think one thing that we do need to consistently look at for our space for female victim survivors is the primary aggressor and how that's seen, particularly at court when we end up with women who are defendants. And granted, sometimes police have no options but to do that because an offence has occurred, and I absolutely recognise that. But I think that as service providers, we can be that voice in raising those concerns with those powers that be that she may well never feel confident to challenge or not even know what her rights are around that.
Yeah.
I think that in terms of service provision, we've just got to work together, like just do better. Everybody can do better.
Yeah.
We all have positive aspects to our service provision, but if we're not going to work together with that client-centred, trauma-informed approach, we're not doing the job that we should be, and I'll be challenging that if I have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That's
Great.
What I would say is that if you're a victim survivor, or even if you're a service provider and you just look at the sector around domestic violence and think, I don't even know where to go, I would strongly say go to your Women's Domestic Violence Court Advocacy Service first. They're the ones who know the services on the ground. They know who's who in the zoo. They know who's got waiting lists. They know who hasn't. At least make that phone call and see if you can work together for her, because having more than one service could be ideal in terms of the service provision that she receives, and it could also help to make such a difference to her safety because it's not just all on one service to do it.
So thank you so much for joining us today, Tanya. That has been absolutely wonderful information, and thank you for sharing the incredible work that the Women's Domestic Violence Court Advocacy Service is doing.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here, and a pleasure to share that information so that people can work harder and collaborate more.
Wonderful. This has been Till the Violence Ends, showcasing the life-saving services addressing gender-based violence every episode until the violence ends. If you or someone you know is being impacted by domestic violence, please call the DV hotline on 1800 65 64 63 or 1800 RESPECT. That's 1800 73 7732, or the men's line on 1300 78 9978. In any emergency situation, please call 000. This has been Till the Violence Ends. Thank you for listening, and goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, Pauline.